Good morning. Who is God calling us to be? Who is God calling us to be? Where do we place ourselves relative to others? Where do we place ourselves relative to others? The setting of today's gospel reading is again the Sabbath. Remember that the Pharisees are watching Jesus closely, especially when he has already been accused of violating the Sabbath, as we had in last week's gospel reading. In the gospel story from Luke, we have Jesus invited to a meal in the home of a Pharisee. Only the elite will have been invited. The meal table was closely tied to one's social standing. Pecking order was reflected in the position one held at the table. So Jesus watched the guests chose the place of honor. Those seated close to the host would be privileged by their proximity to the host. A guest seated to the host would no doubt be the heir of the host, the ability to ask for favors or negotiate a deal. And just as we know, the wedding reception, that those seated at the right and the left of the bridegroom and the bride and the groom are distinguished. So too, other guests at this Sabbath day dinner, we know that those seated there are very special. But Jesus offers some confronting feedback to both the invited and those hosting, which cuts across social and religious divides and ways of valuing one person over another. Now Jesus is not operating within the system, but challenging it. The central principle of this advice is that we are to give things to people without expecting any kind of return. Jesus is describing God's banquet, one which will include everyone, not just the wealthy, friends and relatives, but also the poor, the weak, the marginal, and the blind. Jesus' banquet table must never be a place reserved exclusively for the elite. The important thing to remember is that we are all welcome in God's grace. Christ is always waiting for us and for all those whom we encounter. Christ is waiting for us, offering us a deep and abiding love and asking us to share it with the world. However, Jesus wants those who chose those seats of honor that they may discover they are not special as they thought. Someone may arrive at the dinner who is more distinguished, and they will lose their front row seat. That would be kind of awkward. And Jesus takes pains to show that this demotion is really an experience of humiliation. Rather than to seek to put ourselves forward, we are to wait until we are invited up to the honored position. Of course, there are those instructions given by Jesus to the host of the Sabbath dinner. Do not just invite your friends and family and other people so-called honor. Brothers and sisters, Jesus is speaking directly to us. Jesus wants the dining table to reveal the heavenly banquet, where the lofties are brought low, the humble are brought high, and those with the highest needs are first on the guest list. Our God-given dignity makes us all equal in the eyes of God, no matter what social order we may seek to enforce. God asks us to live into this greatness through our everyday acts towards each other and in and through our relationship with God and creation. Jesus is offering a dose of humility to us in this parable. When you are invited to a banquet, do not sit down at a place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you have been invited by your host. Along with humility, there's another truth that Jesus is getting at in this gospel. It is about generosity. It is about reaching out to others, welcoming strangers, because by doing so, we might entertain an angel. As faithful people, we must recognize that in the eyes of Jesus, we are all equal. Therefore, where we sit is less important than to whom we offer a seat. Jesus clearly teaches that the poor and the weak have a special claim of God's attention. But he does not leave the powerful out. He heals their sickness. He entertains their questions. He attends their dinner party. God's love is for them too. But we all must learn to make room at the table. And making room at the table is more than squeezing in more chairs, more than sharing the food among more plates. It's about willingly giving up our seats for someone else, risking our own status and comfort and even our own portion of our own dinner. So what will it look like if we take the lower place? How would you like to do that? Are you prepared to use your resources in ways that may not pay off in the form of financial or labor resources, but will be life-giving to those in need and reflecting the wide generosity of God? And are we able to see that the call to make these kinds of sacrifices is indeed good news? We are challenged to show hospitality to others. And in doing so, we may just glimpse messages from the divine. Hospitality is not just for the sake of others, but also potentially life-giving for us. Guess what? There'll be growing pains and disappointments and frustrations as we grapple with how to give up our place at the table. How to acknowledge that we have claimed an honored seat in our society that God wishes to give elsewhere. We have to think about how to prioritize other people's needs and other people's voices. But there will also be joy and wonder as we grow into this new expression of faithfulness and encounter the Spirit in new ways. Brothers and sisters, we are disciples on the road. Disciples on the road with Jesus is to share it with those who have nothing and who can give nothing in return. Whoever you are, whatever you have done, you have a place in this house of worship. The worse you feel about yourself, the less the world think of you, the more this house of worship is for you. If you have been cast out by your family, remember Jesus is now your family. If you are lonely, remember this heart of worship is for you and Jesus is your friend. We who follow Jesus should never forget we follow one who was judged and excluded for who he ate with and what he offered for food and drink. We therefore also must keep opening the circle until all creation, all souls belong, and I know they belong to our circle. Amen.